They bound a Navy SEAL in a frozen forest, believing the snow would finish what they started. No backup, no signal.
If you try to break
Just the cold
free,
tightening around every
the
breath,
dog is finished.
and darkness stretching on
Understand?
without a single ray of daylight. Beside him lay a German shepherd, wounded and bleeding, with every reason to run if he wanted to live. But the dog stayed, not because he was trained to, but because some forms of loyalty refuse to listen to fear. As the cold closed in and hope began to fade, a choice was made. And that choice changed everything. What happened next may break your heart, but it will also restore your faith in dogs and in the goodness that still exists. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, like and subscribe, because every follow gives us the strength to tell more stories like this. Now, let's begin. Snow fell without urgency. Not heavy, not dramatic. Just steady, deliberate flakes drifting through the northern air, as if the sky had decided, quietly, that this place would be white for a while. The forest absorbed the sound the way it absorbed everything else. Pines stood tall and motionless, their branches layered with frost, needles dark beneath the weight. No wind yet, no birds, just the faint creak of trees settling into cold. Ethan Cole moved through it with the ease of someone who had learned long ago how not to disturb silence. He was 35, tall, just over 6 feet, with a build that spoke of endurance rather than show. His frame was lean and compact, muscle earned and maintained, not displayed. His face was clean-shaven, jawline square and set, cheekbones sharp under skin weathered by years of cold air and harsher suns. So there was no softness left to him, but there was restraint, discipline that had never quite loosened its grip. His hair, dark brown and cut short in a military style slightly longer than regulation, had grown out just enough to soften the edges without erasing them. His skin was light but wind-burned, the kind that never quite returned to its original tone once you lived long enough in the north. His eyes, gray-blue, steady mist little. When they rested on something, they did not judge. They measured. He wore the same gear he always did now. A faded olive-gray tactical combat shirt clung lightly to his frame, the fabric softened by years of washing and wear. The cuffs were frayed, the shoulders slightly thinned, the color uneven where weather and time had claimed their share. Beneath it, a thermal layer showed faintly at the collar dark red, warmer than the world around him. His combat pants were old too, brown-green with worn knees and sagging cargo pockets that no longer snapped shut the way they once had. His boots were scuffed work boots, military issue from a life he no longer formally belonged to. On his wrist, a battered field watch ticked steadily, its glass scratched, but intact. Nothing he wore was new. Nothing needed to be. At his side moved Ash. The German shepherd was 6 years old, large but not bulky, his coat a layered mix of cream, gray, and black that darkened along the spine and ears. His fur was thick, winter-ready, but scarred in places where time and duty had left their marks. His eyes were amber alert, intelligent, deeply focused. There was a seriousness to him that never slipped into aggression. He did not pull at the lead. He did not lag. He moved as if the forest were a language he spoke fluently, a black harness fit snugly around his chest, reinforced and worn smooth by use. A dark red trim edged the straps, muted but still visible against the snow. When he breathed, it was measured. When he paused, it was for a reason. Ethan trusted that. They were on a routine patrol, nothing special. A northern boundary sweep through protected land where access was restricted and oversight thin. The kind of assignment that kept problems small by noticing them early. Visibility was fair, despite the snowfall. Comms were spotty, but functional. Their unit had split into smaller elements to cover more ground before weather worsened. Ethan preferred it this way. Fewer voices. Fewer decisions layered on top of one another. Ash stopped. It was subtle. Not abrupt. Just a change in rhythm. His ears angled forward, his body stilled, weight shifting slightly back on his hind legs. His gaze fixed on the trees to their left, where the ground dipped and the snow lay undisturbed beneath a stand of younger pines. Ethan noticed immediately. He slowed, scanning the area without raising his rifle. And nothing moved. No tracks. No sound beyond the soft hiss of falling snow. The path ahead was marked on the map as safe used occasionally by survey teams and rangers during warmer months. Ash did not move. "You seeing something?" Ethan murmured. The dog's tail lowered, not tucked, not stiff, focused, controlled. Ethan felt the familiar tension coil low in his chest. Ash had instincts honed through years of work, but Ethan had been trained to weigh them against objective data. Maps, intel, orders. He hesitated. Then he took a step forward. Ash followed, but reluctantly, casting one last look toward the trees, as if memorizing something Ethan had failed to read. The snow thickened as they moved deeper into the forest. Light dimmed under the canopy, turning the world a muted gray-green. Ethan adjusted his pace, boots crunching softly, breath steady. He told himself this was nothing, a false alert. Earth's animals moved strangely in winter. So did dogs. Still, the feeling lingered. He thought, not for the first time, that Ash had never been wrong before. Ash stopped again. This time he did not look left or right. He lowered his head and pressed his nose into the snow, then lifted it sharply, once sniffing the air. A low sound escaped his throat. Not a growl, not a bark. Something in between. Ethan froze. He followed Ash's gaze, not toward movement, but toward absence. A stretch of ground where the snow lay too smooth, too untouched. As if something heavy had passed through hours ago, and the forest had carefully erased its tracks. Ethan's hand drifted toward his radio. The device crackled faintly static, threading through the channel like distant breath. Ash's ears flattened. Then the sound cut. Ethan swallowed, jaw tightening. He took a step back, scanning the tree line with new focus. The quiet felt heavier now, less natural. "All right," he said softly, more to himself than to Ash. "We'll check it." Ash did not move forward. Instead, he shifted closer to Ethan's leg, pressing his shoulder lightly against him, an unusual gesture for a dog trained to maintain space during patrols. It wasn't fear. It was insistence. Ethan exhaled slowly. He thought of discipline, of protocols, of the part of himself that had survived by trusting structure over feeling. And then he thought of the times that structure had failed. "Just a look," he said. They moved together. The forest closed in by degrees. Snow dampened sound until even their own movement felt distant. Ethan's eyes traced lines, branches, shadows, ground cover looking for the smallest inconsistency. Ash slowed, each step careful now. That was when Ethan felt it. Not a sound, not a sight. A pressure, like standing on a threshold without realizing it. His radio remained silent. The air felt wrong. Ethan lifted his hand signal to halt. Ash obeyed instantly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, somewhere ahead, a branch snapped. Sharp, intentional. Ash lunged. The sound of a gunshot tore through the forest. Ethan reacted without thinking, diving sideways as snow erupted where he had stood. Another crack followed closer. Too close. Ash yelped. The sound hit Ethan harder than the shot. He rolled, came up on one knee, scanning for muzzle flash, for movement. But the forest had already swallowed its secret. His heart pounded, breath sharp in his chest. "Ash!" he shouted. The dog was down on his side a few yards away, snow darkening beneath his hind leg. Ethan moved toward him, and the world exploded. A blow from behind slammed into his skull, white light bursting across his vision. He went down hard, the cold rushing up to meet him. Shapes moved around him, boots, shadows, voices too muffled to understand. Hands wrenched his arms back. Pain flared, sharp and absolute. As darkness closed in, Ethan's last clear thought was not of himself. It was of the weight he had ignored, and the dog he should have listened to. Cold came back to Ethan Cole in fragments. First as pressure, something hard against his cheek, unyielding, sucking heat from his skin. Then as sound, the faint scrape of boots against snow, a low murmur of voices carried and distorted by trees. He tried to move, and found that he couldn't. His arms were wrenched behind him, wrists bound tight enough that his hands had already begun to tingle and burn. His ankles followed, locked together with the same unforgiving restraint. Pain arrived last. It bloomed at the back of his skull. Sharp and nauseating, a reminder that he had not gone down cleanly. He forced his eyes open, the world swimming as light filtered through branches overhead. Snow fell into his field of vision, flakes landing on his lashes and melting there. Alive, he thought, surprised by it. As the first face he saw belonged to a man who did not look surprised at all. Grant Holloway stood a few paces away, tall and narrow, his posture relaxed in a way that came only from control. He was in his mid-40s, hair dark but streaked with gray at the temples, combed neatly despite the wilderness. A short, well-kept beard framed a mouth that curved into something like a smile, but never reached his eyes. Those eyes were pale and assessing, the kind that lingered on details other men overlooked. Grant wore clean winter gear, too clean. A white insulated jacket over tactical layers that had never known real field wear. Money showed in the cut of his clothing, in the absence of unnecessary movement. "Careful," Grant said mildly, not to Ethan but to someone out of view. "Don't tighten it more than that. He's not going anywhere." Ethan tested the restraints again. Industrial zip ties reinforced with steel wire. Overkill and deliberate. Whoever these men were, they knew exactly what they were doing. He shifted his gaze, and two others stood nearby. One was broad and heavy-set, his shaved head pink from the cold, a crooked nose that had been broken more than once. His beard was uneven, grown out in patches as if he forgot to care. He watched Ethan with flat, obedient eyes, the look of a man who waited for instructions rather than forming them. The other lingered farther back, thinner, restless, his gloved fingers tapping against the stock of his rifle. He was younger, early 30s maybe, with a red beard that didn't quite hide the tension in his jaw. Neither spoke. Ethan swallowed, his throat dry. He turned his head as far as the bindings allowed. "Ash," he said hoarsely. The dog lay several yards away, half on his side, half on his belly. Snow clung to his coat, darkened near the hind leg where blood had already begun to stiffen. His chest rose and fell too fast, breaths shallow and uneven. One amber eye was open, fixed on Ethan with a focus that cut through the haze in his head. Alive. That mattered more than anything else. Grant followed Ethan's gaze and sighed softly. "The dog's tough," he said, almost conversational. "Rub around. Mostly. He'll be in pain, but pain doesn't kill you. Cold does." Ethan dragged air into his lungs, anger flaring hot enough to push back the numbness. "You shot him." Grant shrugged. "He lunged." "He warned me," Ethan said. That earned him a brief look of interest. Grant's eyes flicked back to Ethan's face, sharpening. "Did he?" Ethan did not answer. Grant stepped closer, boots crunching in the snow. Up close, he smelled faintly of expensive soap and something metallic beneath it. He crouched so they were nearly eye level. "You know what you are," Grant said quietly. "I recognized it the moment you moved. Military, special operations. You don't walk like a ranger." Ethan held his gaze, jaw tight. Grant smiled, thin and precise. "Which is exactly why you're still breathing." He straightened and turned away, and hands clasped behind his back as he paced a short arc. "Killing you would be a mistake. Papers get filed. People ask questions. Men with better resources than mine come knocking." He stopped, glancing up at the sky as snow continued to fall. "This," he gestured vaguely at the forest, "is an accident waiting to happen. Weather. Exposure. Tragic." The broad man shifted his weight. "Boss?" "Enough," Grant said without looking at him. The man fell silent instantly. Grant turned back to Ethan. "We'll be gone in 5 minutes. Your radio's already out of reach. By morning, this place will look untouched." Ethan laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You're counting on the cold to do your work." "I am," Grant replied. "It's very reliable." He nodded to the others. "Pack up." The red-bearded man hesitated, eyes flicking toward Ash. "The dog." Grant's gaze hardened. "Leave it." Ethan strained against his bindings, skin tearing beneath the wire. "Don't," he said, voice low and dangerous. "If he dies." Grant cut him off with a raised hand. "If anything happens," he said calmly, "it won't be because of us." Then he turned and walked away. The men moved quickly, efficient and quiet. Within moments they were swallowed by the trees, their presence erased as if they had never been there at all. Silence rushed back in to fill the space they left behind. Ethan lay there, staring up at the canopy, breath coming in measured bursts. He counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, the way he had been taught to in situations where panic wasted energy. The cold crept in regardless, a slow thief. "Ash," he called again, softer now. The dog shifted, muscles trembling as he tried to push himself upright. His injured leg buckled immediately, a low whine escaping him as he collapsed back into the snow. "Easy," Ethan murmured, though he couldn't reach him. "I'm here." Ash dragged himself closer, inch by inch, teeth bared not in aggression but effort. Each movement left a dark smear behind him. And when he reached Ethan, he pressed his broad chest against Ethan's knees and stopped, panting hard. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, the relief sharp enough to ache. "Good boy." Minutes stretched. The forest remained quiet. too quiet. The cold intensified, seeping through fabric and bone. Ethan's hands burned, then began to lose sensation altogether. He focused on Ash's breathing, the warmth that radiated faintly through his pants. This was survivable, he told himself. For a while. Ash's breathing changed. It slowed, not steadied, but focused. His ears lifted, angling toward something Ethan could not hear. He shifted his weight, lifting his head despite the pain, amber eyes narrowing as if tracking a thought rather than a sound. Ethan frowned. "What is it?" Ash did not look at the trees. He looked at the snow near Ethan's right boot. At first, Ethan saw nothing, then a faint red blink, barely visible beneath the thin layer of powder. "A light." The radio. Ethan's heart stuttered. He had thought it lost, thrown somewhere out of reach. Yet there it was, half buried, its emergency indicator pulsing weakly like a heartbeat. Ash let out a soft, insistent sound. Ethan swallowed, hope flaring sharp and dangerous. "Hey," he whispered. "Listen to me." Ash's gaze snapped back to him immediately. "If I stop talking," Ethan said carefully, each word costing effort, "you find that light." Ash tilted his head, ears twitching. "The red one," Ethan added, "like training." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Ash shifted his body, testing his weight. Pain flashed across his face, but he did not retreat. He took one halting step toward the blinking light. Ethan watched, breath held, as the dog leaned into something older than instruction. The effort cost Ash dearly. He stumbled twice, once falling hard enough to draw a sharp yelp from his throat. But he reached the radio, and teeth closing gently around its casing. He dragged it through the snow, inch by inch, until it bumped against Ethan's boot. Ethan laughed, a broken sound halfway to a sob. "That's it," he whispered. He twisted, straining until he managed to hit the emergency switch with the edge of his boot. The light steadied. A thin chirp sounded. Ash collapsed beside him immediately, pressing his body against Ethan's legs, curling in tight despite the pain. Snow continued to fall, covering them slowly. Ethan stared up at the sky, exhaustion finally seeping in. He didn't know if the signal would reach anyone. He didn't know if morning would come in time. But he knew this. Whatever happened next, neither of them would face it alone. Night did not arrive all at once. It crept in through the trees, dimming the forest by degrees, draining color until the world narrowed to shades of gray and white. The snow kept falling quiet, patient, relentless, settling into folds of clothing, filling the hollows between roots, softening every hard edge except the one that mattered most. The cold. Ethan Cole hung against it, bound and upright, the trunk of a pine biting into his shoulder blades through layers of fabric that no longer felt like protection. The restraints had begun as pain and turned into something worse, absence. His hands were numb now, fingers useless hooks behind him. His ankles burned where circulation fought and failed. Each breath scraped his chest, shallow and controlled, counted in fours because panic wasted heat and heat was life. But he kept his eyes open as long as he could. He watched the forest settle. He watched the snow accumulate on his boots until the leather disappeared. He watched his breath bloom and thin. He watched Ash. The German shepherd lay pressed against his legs, broad chest rising and falling too quickly, coat already stiffening where blood had soaked in and frozen. The dog was 6 old enough to know pain, young enough to fight it. His fur, a layered blend of cream and gray darkening to black along the spine, was thick with snow now, eyelashes rimed white. One ear lay half-flattened, the other twitching at sounds Ethan could not hear. Ash's eyes never left him. "You don't have to stay," Ethan murmured, though his voice came out rough and weak. He hadn't meant to speak. The sound surprised him as much as the silence that followed. "You could find shelter." Ash shifted, muscles trembling. He did not move away. He leaned in closer, shoulder pressed hard against Ethan's knees, weight deliberate. He practiced. The harness creaked faintly as he adjusted, black straps and dark red trim disappearing beneath snow. Ethan huffed a breath that might have been a laugh once. "Stubborn," he said. "Always were." Time stretched thin. He felt the cold working its way up from his feet, a deep ache settling into bone. He remembered instructors talking about it in flat, clinical terms, about how the body shut down in layers, about the false warmth that came before everything went dark. He remembered nodding along, confident, young, certain he would never be caught like this. He remembered other nights, too. Deserts, mountains, the sound of rotors overhead, and the smell of oil and dust. He remembered men who had gone quiet beside him, and the moment he had learned that survival was not a guarantee, it was a negotiation. Ash let out a low sound, not a whine, not a growl. Something closer to a question. "I know," Ethan said. "I know." He focused on the dog's warmth, faint but real, on the steady rhythm of Ash's breathing. On the way, the dog's body curved instinctively to block the wind, angling himself so the worst of it hit fur before fabric. It helped. Minutes blurred into something shapeless. Ethan's thoughts began to drift, edges softening. He caught himself and pulled them back with effort, grounding himself in sensation. The rough bark against his back, the cold metal biting into his wrists, the weight of ash against his legs. "Hey," he said quietly. "Stay with me." Ash's ears flicked, his eyes sharpened, amber catching what little light remained. "I'm still here," Ethan added, more for himself than for the dog. The forest answered with silence. The temperature dropped further as the night deepened. Snow thickened, flakes larger now, clinging stubbornly to everything they touched. Ethan's breathing slowed despite his efforts, his chest tightening with each inhale. His shoulders burned where the bindings pulled, skin tearing beneath the wire as he shifted to keep blood moving. He failed more often than he succeeded. Ash adjusted again, pushing himself higher against Ethan's thighs, curling his body to seal the gap where cold crept in. His injured leg dragged slightly, but he tucked it beneath him with care, jaw clenched, eyes narrowing against pain. "Easy," Ethan whispered. "Easy." Ash pressed his head against Ethan's hip, warm breath ghosting through fabric. The dog's presence was a solid thing, weight and heat and intent. It anchored Ethan in a way nothing else could. He closed his eyes for a moment. The darkness behind them was immediate and tempting. He opened them again. Ash growled. It was soft, barely more than a vibration, but it cut through Ethan's fog like a blade. The dog's head lifted, ears forward, eyes fixed on something beyond the trees. Not movement, not sound, distance. Ethan followed his gaze and felt it too, a pressure, subtle but unmistakable, like the air before a storm. The forest did not look different. It felt different. Ash's tail thumped once against the snow. Then he did something strange. He nudged Ethan's knee with his nose, once, firm and deliberate, and pulled back, watching Ethan's face as if waiting for an answer. Ethan frowned, breath hitching. "What is it?" Ash nudged him again, more insistently, then shifted his weight, repositioning himself so his body pressed higher against Ethan's core, chest to thigh, neck tucked in tight. The change was immediate. The warmth increased. Small, but meaningful. Ethan swallowed. "Yeah," he murmured. "Like that." Ash settled, satisfied, eyes never leaving the dark. The moment passed, but something stayed behind. Ethan felt it in the way Ash remained alert despite exhaustion, in the way his breathing steadied, as if he had found a rhythm the cold could not break. It wasn't intelligence in the human sense, as it was something older, a knowing that did not need language. The snow kept falling. Ethan began to shake. At first it was small, an involuntary tremor in his legs. Then it spread, violent enough to rattle his teeth. He welcomed it. Shivering meant his body was still fighting. It meant he was still here. He thought of warmth, of kitchens, and coffee, and steam rising from mugs. He thought of a woman with auburn hair and green eyes who hated winter but respected it, who had once told him not to play hero, because heroes died alone out there. He wondered, briefly, if she would notice he had missed check-in. The thought slipped away before he could hold it. Ash shifted again, whining softly as if in response to something Ethan hadn't said aloud. He climbed higher, clumsy but determined, bracing his forelegs against Ethan's thighs and hauling part of his weight into Ethan's lap. The contact stole Ethan's breath. "Ash," he said, startled. "Hey." The dog ignored him, rearranging himself with single-minded focus until his chest pressed flush against Ethan's knees and his side sealed the gap where wind cut deepest. Ash's head tucked against Ethan's hip, muzzle buried, breath hot and damp through fabric. The warmth was immediate. Shocking. Ethan laughed, a raw sound that cracked in his throat and broke off into something dangerously close to a sob. "You're not supposed to do that," he whispered. Ash exhaled, a long, steady breath. "Good boy," Ethan said, because he did not have better words. Time lost meaning. Ethan drifted in and out, fighting the pull of sleep with what little discipline he had left. He remembered being told that warmth could lie, that comfort was often the last trick before surrender. He held on to that warning, repeating it silently, and even as his body leaned into the heat Ash offered, he focused on the dog's breathing. In and out, in and out. The cold clawed anyway. His vision tunneled. The edges of the forest blurred, trees bending inward like spectators. He forced his eyes open wider, seeking anchors. Ash's fur, the line of the horizon, the faint outline of his own boots beneath snow. "Stay," he whispered, unsure who he was talking to now. Ash shifted, a low sound rumbling in his chest, not displeased, not alarmed, just present. Ethan let his head fall back against the tree, pain flaring briefly before dulling. He counted again. 1, 2, 3, 4. He lost track somewhere after that. The night pressed in closer, patient and absolute. But Ash did not move. The night loosened its grip in small, reluctant measures. Not light. There was no true light yet, but a thinning of darkness, a subtle shift from absolute black to iron gray. Snow still fell, though finer now, the flakes smaller and more brittle, clicking faintly as they touched branches already burdened by weight. The forest did not wake. It simply adjusted. Ethan Cole surfaced from unconsciousness the way a swimmer breaks water, gasping, disoriented, burning everywhere at once. His first breath tore at his lungs. The second came slower. He tried to move and failed. The restraints bit into his wrists and ankles, cold metal and wire pressing skin raw. His back screamed where it rested against the tree, every muscle stiff and uncooperative. Alive, then. The knowledge landed without relief. Ash was still there. Jetsam, the German shepherd, lay half across Ethan's legs, his body curved protectively, chest pressed tight to Ethan's thighs. Snow coated his fur in uneven patches, melting where heat still clung stubbornly to muscle beneath. His breathing was shallow but steady now, a fragile rhythm Ethan latched onto instinctively. "You stayed," Ethan whispered, voice barely more than breath. Ash did not look up. His eyes were closed, lashes rimed with frost, his jaw slack with exhaustion. One ear twitched at the sound of Ethan's voice. That was enough. Ethan swallowed. His mouth felt thick, tongue numb. He could no longer feel his fingers at all. His feet were distant things, abstract and burning at once. He knew the signs. He had been trained to recognize them, taught to name the stages in neat, academic terms. That knowledge did not make it easier. He shifted his weight minutely, trying to keep blood moving, and failed. The effort cost more than he could afford. And the world tilted at the edges of his vision, narrowing again. Not yet, he told himself. Stay. Ash stirred. The dog lifted his head slowly, as if the air itself resisted the motion. One amber eye opened, then the other, focusing with effort. He took in Ethan's face, the slackness creeping into his features, the shallow rise and fall of his chest. Ash's ears angled forward. He pushed himself upright. Pain registered immediately. His injured hind leg trembled and nearly buckled, a sharp whine escaping before he could stop it. He steadied himself with his forelegs, claws digging into packed snow. His body shook not from fear, but from effort. Ethan watched, alarm flaring through the fog. "Easy," he rasped. "Don't." Ash ignored him. He turned his head, scanning the ground near Ethan's boots. Snow lay smooth there, broken only by the faint impressions of Ethan's heels and the disturbed powder where Ash had shifted throughout the night. Ash lowered his nose and sniffed. He found it. The radio lay half buried, its casing rimmed with ice, the emergency light dim but persistent beneath a thin veil of snow. The red glow pulsed weakly, a heartbeat barely holding on. Ethan's heart stuttered. He had forgotten it. In the long hours of cold and pain, the radio had slipped from his mind entirely, written off as lost, thrown beyond reach by the men who had left him here to freeze. Seeing it now felt unreal, like a trick, conjured by exhaustion. Ash took a step toward it. His leg faltered again. He caught himself, breath hissing between his teeth. He paused, head lowered, as if weighing something unseen. Then he moved. Each step was deliberate, careful. His paws sank into the snow, leaving shallow prints that filled almost immediately. He reached the radio and nosed it, testing. The casing shifted. He nudged it again, and harder this time, until it rolled free of the snow. Ash opened his mouth and gripped it gently, mindful even now not to damage what he carried. The effort made his whole body tense, muscles quivering under strain. Ethan held his breath. Ash turned and began the slow journey back. He fell once hard enough to jolt the radio from his mouth and send a jolt of pain through his frame that made him cry out despite himself. He lay still for a long second, sides heaving, snow dusting his muzzle. "Hey," Ethan whispered urgently. "Ash." The dog pushed himself up again. He reclaimed the radio and dragged it this time, jaws clenched, forelegs doing most of the work while his injured leg trailed behind him uselessly. The distance was short, only a few feet, but it might as well have been miles. When the radio bumped against Ethan's boot, Ash collapsed. Ethan laughed, a sound that broke apart as it left him. "That's it," he murmured. "You did it." He twisted awkwardly, muscles protesting, and managed to press the emergency switch with the edge of his boot. The radio chirped, a thin, hopeful sound that cut through the forest's silence. The light steadied. Ash did not look up. He lay where he had fallen, sides heaving, eyes half-lidded. Ethan leaned forward as much as his bindings allowed, desperate to touch him, to reassure him with something more than words. "I've got you," he said, though he wasn't sure who he meant anymore. "We've got a chance now." Ash shifted, dragging himself closer again, reclaiming his place against Ethan's legs with stubborn determination. He curled in tight, pressing his body back into position, warmth and weight sealing the space the cold had been trying to claim. Ethan exhaled shakily. The radio crackled. Not a voice, just static, thin and distant, but it was enough. The sound sliced through Ethan's fading awareness like a blade. Ash's ears flicked up instantly. His eyes opened fully now, sharp despite exhaustion, affixed on the device at Ethan's boot. His tail gave a faint, involuntary thump against the snow. Ethan's breath caught. "You hear that?" he whispered. "That's good. That means it's working." The static faded again, leaving only the whisper of snow. Ash did not relax. He stayed alert, head lifted, eyes tracking the empty forest as if daring it to challenge them again. The dog's body remained pressed tight to Ethan's legs, a living anchor between him and the cold. For the first time since the night began, Ethan felt something shift. Not warmth, not safety. Hope. The minutes that followed were an exercise in endurance. Ethan focused on staying conscious, on the simple mechanics of breathing. In and out, slow, measured. He forced his thoughts to stay anchored to the present, to the feel of Ash's fur beneath his numb fingers when he managed, once, to brush it with the back of his hand. The sensation barely registered, but it was enough to remind him that this was real. Ash remained vigilant. What every small sound earned a lift of his head, a sharpening of his gaze. His breathing steadied as the worst of the exertion passed, though the pain in his leg was evident in the way he shifted carefully, avoiding pressure. Snow accumulated around them, softening the outline of their bodies. Ethan's boots disappeared entirely beneath white. His legs burned, then dulled. He welcomed the numbness even as it frightened him. "Stay with me," he murmured again, unsure if he was asking the dog or himself. Ash answered by pressing closer. The radio remained silent after that brief crackle, its light dimming as the battery fought the cold. Ethan watched it the way he once watched distant ridgelines through a scope focused, patient, willing it to matter. He thought of people, briefly. Of a woman with auburn hair and steady green eyes who had warned him not to rely on luck, and of a life beyond this forest that felt impossibly far away. Mostly, he thought of the dog beside him. How Ash had chosen, again and again, not the easy path, but the one that kept them together. How instinct had stepped in where Ethan's body could not. The cold did not care. It pressed closer anyway, patient as ever. But for now, Ethan was still here. And Ash was breathing, Morning did not arrive with light so much as with movement. The darkness loosened its hold by degrees, the black thinning into iron gray, the forest emerging in layers, trees first, then ground, then the soft contours of snowdrifts shaped by wind and time. The storm had passed in the night. What remained was quiet, the kind that settled after effort, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Ethan Cole surfaced from a fractured sleep with pain lodged deep in his bones. Every breath burned. His wrists were numb beyond pain now, fingers useless hooks behind him, but the pressure of the bindings still registered as a distant ache. His legs were stiff and heavy, as if they belonged to someone else. When he tried to move, his body answered slowly, reluctantly. He was alive. That surprised him. Ash lay against him, pressed close, at his weight steady and familiar. The German shepherd's chest rose and fell in a stubborn rhythm, slower than it had been during the night, but still too shallow. Frost clung to his whiskers. His injured leg was tucked carefully beneath him, guarded. One amber eye opened when Ethan shifted, locking onto him with immediate focus. "Hey," Ethan rasped. Ash's tail thumped once barely more than a twitch, but it was there. The radio lay near Ethan's boot, half buried again by drifting snow. Its red indicator was dimmer now, the pulse irregular, as if the battery were fighting its last quiet battle against the cold. Ethan fixed his gaze on that light. He did not know how long it would last. Minutes passed, or seconds. Time had lost its edges. Then Ash's ears lifted sharply. Ethan felt it too. Not sound at first, but vibration. A low thrum carried faintly through the frozen air, so distant it could have been imagined. He held his breath, afraid to move, afraid to hope. The sound returned, steadier this time. "Rotors!" Ash pushed himself upright with a strained grunt and barked once, sharp and clear, the sound slicing through the stillness like a signal flare. He barked again, louder, throwing his voice into the trees. Ethan twisted as far as the bindings allowed, neck screaming in protest as he searched the sky beyond the canopy. At first, there was nothing but gray, then movement dark against lighter cloud. A shape circling, deliberate. The helicopter came into view, banking slowly, snow whipping beneath it in widening spirals. Ethan sagged back against the tree, breath shuddering. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been holding himself together until that moment. The helicopter set down beyond the tree line, its rotors still spinning, churning the snow into a blinding storm. Figures emerged from the white, moving with purpose, but their voices carried and lost in the wind. One of them broke ahead of the others. Sarah Mitchell moved like someone who had spent her life walking toward danger rather than away from it. She was in her early 30s, tall and lean, her build wiry with strength earned outdoors rather than in a gym. Her auburn hair was braided tight down her back, practical and severe, though loose strands had already escaped to whip against her freckled cheeks. Her skin was pale beneath windburn, flushed with cold and exertion. Her eyes, sharp green, took in everything at once, missing nothing. She wore a heavy ranger jacket marked with the state seal, its fabric scarred by use. The way she carried herself, shoulders squared, steps efficient, spoke of discipline shaped by loss. People who knew her knew the reason. A younger brother buried years ago beneath an avalanche not far from here. Since then, Sarah did not waste time. She did not gamble with safety. "Ethan," she said, voice raised over the rotor wash. It was not relief in her tone, but something close, Don't move." He huffed a weak laugh. "Wasn't planning on it." She reached him in seconds, gloved hands already assessing, fingers probing the restraints at his wrists. Her jaw tightened as she took in the damage, the wire biting deep, the skin torn and pale beneath. "Jesus," she muttered. "You always ignore protocol, or just when it's inconvenient?" "Only on scenic days," Ethan said, then winced as sensation flared briefly and vanished again. Another figure knelt beside Ash. Tom Alvarez was compact and solid, early 40s, with dark hair flecked gray and a thick mustache that framed a mouth set permanently into calm focus. His eyes were kind but efficient, the look of a man who had seen too many broken bodies to waste time on panic. He wore SAR medic gear, movements precise, as he assessed the dog. 6-year-old shepherd, Tom said quietly, and hands gentle as he checked Ash's leg. "Gunshot, non-lethal, hypothermia risk. He's tough." Ash growled faintly, more protest than threat. Tom smiled despite himself. "Easy, buddy. You did good." Sarah cut through the wire at Ethan's wrists with quick, practiced movements. The release was immediate and brutal. Sensation crashed back into Ethan's arms in a wave of pain so sharp it stole his breath. He slumped forward, vision flashing white at the edges. Sarah caught him by the shoulders, steady and unyielding. For a moment, the professional mask slipped. Her grip tightened, grounding him. "You're not allowed to die out here," she said, voice low and fierce. "I've buried enough people to winter." Ethan met her gaze, understanding the weight behind the words. "Wasn't my plan," he murmured. They worked quickly after that. Thermal blankets wrapped Ethan in layers, the heat both agony and relief. Another rescuer, young, blonde, wide-eyed, and barely out of his 20s, helped steady Ash as Tom prepared a padded sled. The dog resisted until Ethan reached out, numb fingers curling weakly into thick fur. "It's okay," Ethan whispered. "They've got you." Ash's ears relaxed. Trust absolute. He allowed himself to be moved. As they guided Ethan toward the helicopter, he caught sight of the clearing one last time. The rusted support beam, the blood-darkened snow, the place where winter had nearly finished him. Something flickered at the edge of his vision, a thought, unbidden and unwelcome. They didn't finish the job. The realization settled heavy in his chest, colder than the air. Whoever had left him here had done so with intent, not haste. That meant this wasn't over. Not really. Ethan closed his eyes as the helicopter lifted, the forest shrinking beneath them. Inside the cabin, the noise dulled, replaced by the steady thrum of flight. Ethan leaned his head back against the seat, exhaustion finally claiming ground. His hands throbbed beneath the blankets. His breath came easier now, though each inhale still burned. Ash was secured beside him, head resting against Ethan's knee. Despite everything, the dog found the contact, leaning into it as if to confirm what he already knew. Tom adjusted the IV line and nodded once. "You're stable," he said. "Both of you. Hypothermia, injuries, nothing we can't work with." Ethan swallowed. "The dog." Tom met his eyes. "He's alive because he's stubborn. Same as you." Sarah stood near the door, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the passing landscape. In daylight, she looked exactly as Ethan remembered, controlled, capable, carrying her grief like armor rather than a wound. She turned as if sensing his attention. "You should have called it in earlier," she said, not unkindly. "Whatever you saw out there, it wasn't worth this." Ethan thought of Ash's hesitation. of the weight he had ignored. "You're right," he said quietly. The helicopter carried them south, and away from the forest that had nearly claimed them. Below, the snowfields stretched unbroken, hiding secrets beneath their clean surface. Ethan closed his eyes. The image of that clearing burned into his mind. Winter had taken its shot. It had missed. Recovery did not feel like rest. It felt like being held still while the world moved on without him. Ethan Cole lay awake long before the monitors began their steady chorus, staring at the pale ceiling of the regional medical center. The room smelled of antiseptic and warm plastic, a sharp contrast to pine and snow. Light filtered through blinds in narrow bands, striping the wall like bars. His hands were wrapped, wrists bruised deep purple beneath gauze. Nerve pain came and went in flashes, sharp reminders that sensation had returned, even if control had not. His legs ached with a dull persistence that made sleep an effort rather than a relief. Alive, he reminded himself. He turned his head toward the empty space beside the bed. Ash should have been there. The dog had been taken straight from the helicopter to veterinary triage. Ash was separated with practiced efficiency and gentle hands. Ethan had barely been conscious enough to protest, and when he had tried, the words had come out tangled and weak. "He's stable," they had told him. "But it's serious." Stable was a word Ethan did not trust. A knock came at the door before he could chase the thought further. Dr. Melissa Crane stepped inside with a tablet tucked under one arm. She was in her late 30s, average height, with dark hair pulled back into a loose bun that suggested she had given up fighting it hours ago. Her face was narrow and expressive, lines etched faintly at the corners of her mouth from years spent delivering difficult truths. Her eyes, brown, steady held a practiced calm that didn't pretend things were better than they were. She wore scrubs beneath a fleece jacket, sleeves pushed up, with forearms marked by old scars Ethan recognized as animal-related without asking. "You're awake," she said, offering a small, professional smile. "That's good." "How's the dog?" Ethan asked immediately. Melissa hesitated. It was brief, barely more than a pause, but Ethan caught it. "He survived the night," she said carefully. "The wound was worse than it looked in the field. Bone involvement, a lot of soft tissue damage. Hypothermia complicated things." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. But he's alive," she repeated. "And he's fighting." That mattered. But the pause still sat between them, heavy. "What aren't you saying?" Ethan asked. Melissa glanced at the door, then back at him. She pulled a chair closer and sat, lowering her voice. "Ash won't be cleared for operational duty again." The words landed quietly, but they landed hard. Ethan nodded once. He had known that already, in his bones. "Retired, then?" "Yes." Melissa's fingers tightened slightly around the tablet. "He'll be processed through the standard K-9 retirement protocol once he's stable enough to move." "And then?" Ethan asked. She met his gaze. This time she didn't look away. "Placement," she said. "Ideally adoption. Sometimes transfer to a sanctuary." "Sometimes." Ethan exhaled slowly. "I'll take him." Melissa's expression softened. "I figured you'd say that." "I mean it," he said. "As soon as I'm cleared." She nodded. "I'll note your intent." She stood, hesitating again, then added, "There's a backlog. Right now." Ethan frowned. "A backlog?" "Too many dogs," she said. "Not enough placements, especially for ones with injuries. The system's stretched thin." The word system scraped something raw inside him. "Where will he be until then?" Ethan asked. Melissa glanced down at her tablet. A holding facility. Temporary. Temporary had been another word he no longer trusted. Days passed. Ethan was discharged to a recovery cabin on the edge of the reserve. Medical restrictions heavy, but manageable. The cabin was small, functional, the kind built for seasonal staff who needed shelter more than comfort. Snowmelt traced silver lines down the valley outside the window, a promise of spring that felt premature. Ash did not come with him. Each day, Ethan asked. Each day, he was told the same thing. Processing. Paperwork. Soon. He healed slowly, patience worn thin by the absence that followed him from room to room. He replayed the night in fragments, the weight of ash against his legs, the sound of his breathing, the feel of fur beneath numb fingers. When the call finally came, it wasn't the one he expected. It was Melissa again, her voice lower than usual. "He's been transferred," she said. Ethan straightened, heart kicking. "Transferred where?" There was a pause. Longer this time. "I don't have the details," Melissa said. "The record just says released from active program." "That's not an answer," Ethan said. "No," she agreed quietly. "It's not." Something in her tone shifted, the professional distance thinning just enough to let concern through. "Ethan, some of the files lately, they're not as clean as they should be." "What does that mean?" "It means," she said carefully, "that dogs with extensive injuries are being moved through the system faster than usual, faster than oversight can keep up with." Ethan felt the room tilt, anger rising slow and controlled. "You're saying he disappeared?" Melissa looked at him then, really looked at him. "I'm saying the system is overwhelmed, and when systems are overwhelmed, things slip," she left him with that. Ethan did not sit with it. He started asking questions. At first, he kept it informal calls to old contacts, quiet conversations over coffee. He learned that Ash was not the only one, that other handlers had asked and been given answers just vague enough to close the conversation. One name came up more than once, Deputy Ryan Brooks. Ethan found him at a roadside diner just outside town, a place that smelled of grease and burnt coffee. Ryan Brooks was in his early 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that looked permanently tired. His beard was neatly trimmed, but flecked with gray, his uniform worn in the way of someone who spent more time outside than behind a desk. He listened more than he spoke. "You're not the first to ask," Ryan said finally, pushing his mug aside. "And you won't be the last." "So where do they go?" Ethan asked. Ryan shrugged, a careful motion. "Officially? Adoption? Sanctuaries. Unofficially." He met Ethan's eyes. "Some of them vanish." Ethan leaned back, jaw tight. "You know more than that." Ryan's gaze flicked to the window, then back. "I know enough to be careful, and I know enough to say this. There's a group that's been real active lately. Calls themselves a rescue network. Takes in strays, retirees. Oh, looks good on paper." "And isn't," Ethan said. Ryan's mouth twitched. "Not always." Silence settled between them, thick and measured. "What are you asking me?" Ryan said at last. "I'm asking you to look the other way," Ethan replied evenly. "Just long enough." Ryan studied him for a long moment. He saw the discipline in Ethan's posture, the restraint. He saw the exhaustion, too. "Don't make me regret it," Ryan said finally. "I won't," Ethan said. He meant it. That night, Ethan sat alone in the cabin, scrolling through public posts and donation pages. Photos of smiling volunteers, clean kennels, happy dogs. One image stopped him cold. A German shepherd, side profile only, harness half visible beneath fur, cream and gray, dark along the spine. A scar near the hind leg, partially hidden by shadow. The caption read, "New arrival, temporary care." Ethan's breath caught. He stared at the screen, heart pounding, unsure whether hope was a gift or a trap. He closed the laptop slowly. Outside, out the valley lay quiet beneath a thinning blanket of snow. Somewhere out there, systems moved and papers were signed and decisions were made without faces attached to them. Ethan flexed his hands, pain flaring, grounding him. He had survived worse than bureaucracy. If Ash had been reduced to a line in a ledger, Ethan would find the margins. The dogs without names still mattered, and he was not finished. The road was wet with thaw. Ethan Cole drove slowly, both hands steady on the wheel, the cabin heater humming low. Meltwater ran in narrow streams along the shoulder, carrying grit and pine needles downhill. Spring in the north did not announce itself. It tested the ground first, loosened its grip inch by inch. His wrists still ached when the weather shifted. The pain was manageable now, a reminder rather than a warning. He had learned to live with reminders. The address Deputy Ryan Brooks had slipped him was unremarkable. An old warehouse beyond the last cluster of houses, paint peeling, fence patched in places with mismatched wire. A hand-painted sign hung crooked near the gate. Community Rescue. Appointment only. Ethan parked across the street and waited. He watched volunteers come and go. As a woman in her 20s with a ponytail and bright gloves carried a bag of feed. A middle-aged man with soft hands and a practiced smile unloaded crates from a van. Everything looked right. Too right. The kind of right that came from rehearsed care. He checked his phone. The camera icon glowed back at him. Ethan had spent the last 2 weeks doing this, observing, delivering donations, blending into the background. He had learned the rhythm of the place, morning intake, afternoon sorting, late evening transfers. Dogs arrived. Dogs left. Paperwork followed. Faces rarely did. He stepped out of the truck, pulling his jacket tighter against the damp air. The shoulder still felt stiff when he moved wrong. He adjusted his gait, made himself unremarkable. Inside, the building smelled of bleach and damp fur. Kennels lined the walls in neat rows, tags clipped to each door. Volunteers moved with practiced efficiency, voices low, gentle. A woman approached him with a clipboard. She was in her late 30s, tall and thin, and hair bleached to a brittle blonde and pulled back too tight. Her smile was automatic. Her eyes were not. "Delivery?" she asked. "Donation," Ethan said, lifting the boxes he carried. "Food, blankets." She nodded, satisfied. "Drop them by intake." He did. He lingered longer than necessary, eyes scanning the kennels. German shepherds were kept toward the back. Most were young, some anxious. A few older, their eyes tired, movements careful. Ethan forced himself to breathe evenly, to keep walking, to not see what he wanted to see in every familiar silhouette. Then he heard it. Not a bark. A sound lower, rougher. A single, restrained huff. Ethan stopped. He did not turn immediately. He let the sound settle, let the memory surface without rushing it. He knew that sound. It was the noise Ash made when he recognized something but waited for permission to react. Ethan turned. The kennel door was half-shadowed. The dog inside stood with his weight shifted forward. and one hind leg held carefully off the ground. His coat was thinner than Ethan remembered, the cream and gray dulled by poor lighting, but the dark line along the spine was unmistakable. A healing scar traced the muscle near the injured leg. The dog's eyes met his. Recognition did not explode. It did not rush. It arrived quietly. Ash stilled, ears forward, amber gaze locked. His tail did not move. His mouth did not open. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. He took a step closer. Another. Ash's chest rose and fell. Once. Twice. Ethan swallowed. "Hey," he said softly. The dog's ears flicked. Ethan did not smile. He did not rush the door. He said the only thing that mattered. "If God let us grow old together," Ash barked. The sound broke the room open. He lunged forward as far as the kennel allowed, paws scraping metal, tail slamming once, twice, while the restraint of moments before vanished, replaced by a joy so sudden it hurt to watch. The woman with the clipboard spun around. "Sir." Ethan had already raised his phone. "I wouldn't," he said calmly, meeting her eyes. "There are officers outside." She hesitated. Just long enough. Sirens cut through the air. The warehouse erupted into motion, voices rising, doors opening, crates clattering. Deputy Ryan Brooks stepped in with 2 uniformed officers, faces set, movements efficient. He met Ethan's eyes once and nodded. They worked quickly. Paperwork was seized. Computers unplugged. Dogs were checked, cataloged, removed from the chain of quiet transfers that had carried them here. Volunteers who had believed the story were separated from those who had written it. Ethan stayed with Ash. When the kennel door finally opened, Ash did not bolt. He stepped forward carefully, testing his injured leg, then pressed his head against Ethan's thigh with a low sound that vibrated straight through bone. Ethan knelt despite the protest in his joints and wrapped his arms around the dog's neck. The fur was thinner. The warmth was the same. "I kept it," Ethan murmured into his coat. "The promise." Ash's tail thumped. Once. Solid. As they led Ash out, Ethan caught sight of the intake ledger on the desk, pages of names reduced to numbers, notes clipped short. One line read, K9. Retired. Temporary care. Temporary had almost taken him. Ethan closed the book and handed it to Ryan without a word. The valley looked different on the drive back. Snow still clung to the shaded slopes, but green pushed through in stubborn patches. Water ran louder now, freed from ice. The world did not erase winter. It carried it forward, reshaped. They stopped at the cabin. Ash moved slowly, adjusting to space and light, sniffing corners as if confirming reality one breath at a time. He drank deeply, then lay near the door, head up, watchful. Ethan eased himself into the chair opposite. Was letting the quiet settle. Later, Tom Alvarez arrived with supplies and a grin that softened when he saw the dog. "Famous," he said, kneeling to scratch behind Ash's ears. "Training units have been asking about him." Ash huffed, uninterested. They talked about options, sanctuaries, foster networks, places farther south with softer winters. Ethan listened, then shook his head. "He's home," he said. No one argued. The days that followed were slow by design. Ash healed. Scar tissue formed. The leg would never be what it was. That was fine. Ethan's hands would never fully stop aching either. They adjusted together. Sarah Mitchell visited once, standing on the threshold with the valley behind her, auburn hair loose for the first time Ethan had ever seen. She did not stay long. She did not need to. "You stayed," she said simply. "So did he," Ethan replied. Spring did not rush them. When Ethan stepped outside at dusk, Ash joined him, leaning gently into his leg. The earth smelled of thaw and pine sap. The mountains held their shape against the sky, patient and indifferent. Ethan rested his hand in the dog's fur and let the moment be enough. Survival had not been the end. It had been the beginning of something quieter. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes they arrive on 4 wounded legs, in silence, in loyalty that refuses to leave even when every reason to survive says go. What saved Ethan was not strength alone, and it was not luck. It was a bond placed where fear could not reach. A reminder that God often works through devotion, patience, and love that asks for nothing in return. In our own lives, we may not face frozen forests or life-and-death nights, but we all know what it feels like to be bound, exhausted, and unsure if help is coming. And in those moments, grace often appears quietly, through a person who stays, a kindness we didn't expect, or a second chance we thought we had lost. If this story touched something in your heart, share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us what this story meant to you or where you are watching from. Your words may be the encouragement someone else is waiting for. And if you believe, even just a little, that loyalty still matters and that miracles still happen in ordinary ways, consider subscribing to this channel. These stories are for those who are still holding on. May God bless you, protect you, and walk beside you in every quiet battle you face. May He send warmth when the nights feel long, strength when your body is tired, and grace when you need it most.